It's a pleasure joining Irina, Slav, and David Blackmon. Good morning and good afternoon.
Good morning.
Good day.
This is the episode number 36 of the Energy Transition Podcast. Our topic for today is energy diversification in Europe. Let me show the points that I suggest that we can cover. The first one is energy diversification in Europe itself. And the idea is, as I mentioned before, we can comment that one of the most important energy security principles is the diversification of sources and routes and so. And let me show a picture that we can see pipelines from Russia to Europe, 2021. Some of them just completed, some under construction, and some banned by
Blown up.
cannot. Yeah,
Yeah, some blown
exactly.
up. Yeah.
Yeah, and the volumes is stupid. It's 230 billion cubic meter per year. It's high volumes. And the point is the following. Let me start with Irina, please, first. Irina, you see that we have a diversification, or we are still very dependent on Russia without gas at these days in Europe?
Well, judging by the latest I'm reading about Europe, about Germany, for example, about the UK, not that the UK has been a major importer of Russian gas, but it appears to have been an importer of any gas from the European continent. So now there's talk about blackouts in both the UK and in Germany, which tells me that even though US LNG has been very, very important, a very important factor in replacing, Russian supplies to Europe. It hasn't been enough to replace them completely, and everybody knows this because US producers simply cannot produce enough to replace all the Russian gas. That's 230 billion cubic meters in export capacity to Europe, but that includes Turkey. So Europe has been importing Russian gas at the rate of about 150 billion cubic meters per year. And US LNG simply cannot replace all of this, even with Norwegian gas. There's simply not enough gas and not enough LNG tankers, but I expect we'll be discussing this later.
And David, you see the same United States, so the same. I mean, no diversification, no contingencies compared to Europe.
Yeah. So of course, we've been talking about this since March, since President Biden made his ill-advised commitment on behalf of the U.S. LNG industry without talking to anyone in it to become Europe's main natural gas supplier. And we've been pointing these limitations out for 7 months on this podcast. Yeah. And unfortunately, the reality is now beginning to hit home in Germany and the UK, as Irina pointed out. And I suspect it, will be a problem in some other European countries, not across the whole continent, of course. But, as Irina pointed out, there's simply a limit to the number of LNG tankers on the face of the earth. And it's not just a limit of U.S. LNG, but global U.S. LNG export volume availability that can't all be diverted to Europe. I mean, we are already, I interviewed Daniel Yergin last week for my podcast. And, he pointed out that since in January, 70% of U.S. LNG exports were going to Asia. And today, about 70% are going to Europe now. And what's happening as a result is poorer nations, mainly in Asia, like Sri Lanka, like Pakistan, and others, are now experiencing huge blackout issues because they can't obtain natural gas in enough quantities to keep their power grids running. Pakistan is averaging in parts of that country 12 to 19 hours per day of power blackouts because of this. And so it's not only logistically difficult, it is in a way cruel to divert all of these LNG cargoes to one place because so many other countries had been relying on them. And this is a real growing issue that's going to create massive unrest. It already is creating massive unrest in many of these countries in developing nations and in Europe. Over the weekend, we saw huge protests in Paris again over high energy costs, and so they're starting to see the high cost of heating their homes that's going to be coming their way this winter, and the populations are not going to like it much, and these governments in some of these countries are going to have a hard time maintaining power as a result.
Perfect. This let me show the next point I would like to suggest was new hub in Turkey for natural gas, and see that David wrote the following: building another natural gas pipeline under the Black Sea to Turkey, where the gas could interconnect into already existing pipelines or be exported as LNG. David, please explain to us this mention. David, you are mute.
We can't hear you.
Yeah, we can hear him. Let's see if we can fix this.
Is it another of those days when technology is against us?
Every time we are suffering with this. Let me see. Let me remove this from here. Maybe if. Yeah,
No.
we cannot hear you. Yeah.
Somehow the mute button.
No, it's okay. No, it's okay.
Okay, so back to where I started. Putin is everyone's villain, deservedly so, but this is a fairly ingenious idea. Now that both the Nord Stream lines have been blown up, we still don't know who the culprit is, but I think we all have suspicions. So Putin's looking for another outlet for his natural gas to keep the money flowing into the country's coffers, and the prospect of building a new pipeline, I suspect it would go from Crimea probably down to Turkey, although I haven't seen specifics about it. But and interconnect to the pipelines that go through Ukraine now from Russia. But to build a new hub in Turkey, which is apparently a willing participant in such a project, or seems to be, is a fairly ingenious idea. It wouldn't take all that long to do, because the EU and NATO would have a hard time denying access to Russia to do this, and so it's a way for Putin. We talk about diversification. It's a way for Putin to diversify his ability to export, continue to export his nation's amazing mineral resources, and there's going to be a lot more of this kind of proposal to develop projects with countries that are still willing to do trade deals with Russia.
You're muted as well.
What is going on? Yeah, I can't hear you guys now.
Yeah, now it's working,
Okay.
I suppose.
There we go.
Yeah, Irina, do you see that can be a bypass intention using Turkey as a hub for Russian natural gas?
Well, yes. I mean, Turkey and Russia have been coming together for years now, because both Vladimir Putin and Erdogan of Turkey are quite pragmatic in their leadership and in their strategy. So it was more or less meant to happen, especially after the European Union shunned Russia so completely. So, okay, if you don't want our gas, we'll give it to Turkey and you'll have to buy it from Turkey, which is probably what's going to happen.
And are you here? Yeah.
Yes.
Still here. Yes. Yeah, but the point is, Western countries will accept this kind of partnership, and
What exactly could they do? Go and bomb Turkey? I mean, Turkey has a grudge with the European Union because Turkey had been negotiating for membership of the European Union for years, and then when the refugee crisis, because of the Syrian war, began, suddenly things soured between the EU and Turkey, and Turkey tried to use refugees as leverage, saying, I will let all the refugees come to you if you don't do what I want. And the EU didn't want to do what Erdogan wanted. That's putting it in completely basic terms. It's really simplification. But
great.
relations between the EU and Turkey haven't been so great. And I think Erdogan has realized that he needs to rely on himself, mostly on his own policies. So he's leading a quite independent a policy in energy, and with an energy supplier as huge as Russia offering cooperation, why not accept it? What exactly could Europe do? Kick Turkey out of NATO? That will be that's actually a possible move. I mean, it will fit in with what we've been seeing from the collective West.
Sure.
Perfect.
That would not be unforeseeable at all, would it?
Yeah.
And
So there is,
what we
I thought it would sound like a joke, but it didn't.
it really doesn't sound like a joke to me. I
yeah, but it's
could
not a
totally
joke.
see the Biden administration, leading that effort.
Yeah, there is a
Yeah.
question from Grand Final. He's a very strong participant of our videos.
Oh,
So if welcome, who can address this?
global oil demand has rebounded by 2 million barrels per day since August. With the ever dwindling supply of energy, how much longer can government politicians claim to fight climate change by pushing renewables? That's a really excellent question, and I think it's really right on point. And we've talked about this here too since March. The answer to every energy question to people like Jennifer Granholm and Pete Buttigieg and Fatih Birol is always, well, we just need more renewables for every problem, regardless of what the question actually is. And that's a conceit that can only last as long as these people hold power. And we've already seen these globalist kinds of leaders begin to fall in Italy and other places in Europe. There's going to be a series of elections in Europe in the coming year that I suspect we'll see similar results. And here in the United States, the tide seems to be shifting a little bit as well. But, the thing is, as long as they're in power, they are absolutely committed to this narrative. And this attempt at forcing an energy transition that goes against the laws of physics, thermodynamics, and economics. And so it's going to depend on the voters and the democratic societies that are pushing all of this. Most of them are democratic societies to force a change in leadership, and then the narrative will shift.
Mhm. Irina, do you want to comment this question?
Yeah, I would just mention the recent speech by Germany's economy minister Robert Habeck, who said that the current crisis is unfolding because of fossil fuels, because of
Right.
oil and gas. It's all the fault of oil and gas. We should go more renewable. So why are you building LNG import terminals?
Exactly. None of it makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They don't care that it doesn't make sense. He got a standing ovation.
Of course, yes.
I
And,
just compare.
I would like to point out that I also did a post about Mike Worth. I'm sorry, the CEO of Chevron made
Right.
some comments last week, and very strong comments
Mm.
about the senseless nature of the energy policies that the United States is pursuing. And I put up a post on LinkedIn on all that, and it went pretty viral. And I actually had notes coming in from current Chevron employees saying that, I really am proud of the CEO for standing up and saying these things, but it is not popular even in the employee base at Chevron.
Mhm.
So we have to understand that this narrative is not just something pushed by these leaders. It's really gone viral within our
Yeah.
societies and has
Yeah.
an awful lot of popular support.
Yeah. There is another question. This is another guy that's very present in our lives every time he's here. SRB. Please, David, you wanted to
Would
address it
you
first?
would you say a few words about the impending gas field agreement between Hezbollah, Lebanon, and Israel, brokered by the United States? And I am actually not at all familiar with this subject.
It's
Irina,
about the
are you?
maritime border. Yes, there's a vast gas field offshore
Mm-hmm.
Israel and Lebanon, and they're arguing about where the maritime border passes. Obviously, both want it to pass in such a way that they get more of the field. As far as I know, the latest I heard last week, or I can't remember when was, they're still discussing it, but Israel is already drilling. Well, not Israel.
Yes.
Yeah.
A company that Israel awarded with exploration rights.
Is it Noble
Uh,
Energy? It was
no,
Noble years ago.
Energian. I'm not sure how it's pronounced, or Energian. I don't know.
Oh,
It's a
Energy. Okay. Yeah.
right, Energian. It's a UK-based company. It's got the exploitation rights, and it was either starting drilling. I think it was preparing to start drilling. And Lebanon wasn't very happy about it. And given the track record of this particular region of the world, uh, I don't know how things will get settled. But it would be great if they can get settled. I mean, at
Yeah.
least one thing,
Yeah.
so
Thank you.
both can benefit.
Benefit. Yeah. Yeah. So thank you, Grand Finale and SRB for the comments. So
Thank you. Great
let's.
questions.
Yeah. Very good. The third point is related to US LNG. We talked before, this term is not new for us, but I every time I need to talk about this because I feel it's a little bit vulnerable, this situation of high volumes of LNG
Yeah.
coming from the US. And David, what do you see in terms of price, time, safety, internal policy, yeah, and the priorities, of course, that the countries
Yeah.
that are exporting have?
I mean, I think it's reliable to a certain extent. There's definitely a limit. As long as this administration is in power, there's going to be an inertia coming from the federal government against permitting new LNG export facilities and allowing that export capacity to really increase dramatically, even though the president on the one hand says, yes, you can rely on the United States to be your supplier. The truth is the administration is really slow playing the development, the build out of new facilities. And so, it's all going to depend on how the next couple of elections go in the United States and whether or not, if Mr. Biden gets a second term, then, the efforts by the U.S. government to really kill the oil and gas industry here in the United States, which is their often repeated goal, will only increase in a second term because they won't be worried about getting reelected again. And so uh, we're a reliable partner up to a point, but if you're relying on us to be the United States to be your hero where energy supply is concerned, it's a very risky prospect. Oh, did I lose you again?
You're
No,
on
no,
mute
it's my
again.
fault. My fault.
Oh.
My fault.
Oh, okay.
How do you see it in this dependence of high dependence of LNG, especially from the US?
Well, I see it as replacing one dependence with another dependence, replacing one supplier with another supplier. You're vulnerable to this supplier, which is the point of diversification, to not rely on a single supplier.
Yep.
Perfect. Perfect.
And LNG is so much more expensive.
Oh, yes, that too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Very much
And
so.
and depends on priorities, internal priorities of United States. Depends on
Yes,
the consumption
That
that's
capacity.
right.
too, exactly. That's why the importer, the one who's dependent, is very vulnerable
Yeah,
to the
exactly,
priorities of the supplier.
exactly, exactly. And for the same issue, there are other suppliers, LNG suppliers. For instance, Qatar, North Africa, and others. Australia, I suppose, too. How
Mhm.
do you see this? I mean, these other suppliers, and can they increase, especially for North Africa? I suppose that Algeria sends to uh, Portugal. Portugal probably consumes
Or
Argentinian.
Spain, I don't know.
Yeah. How do you see these other countries trying to increase LNG, maybe uh, supply?
Well, Algeria will need a lot of help to do it because it will need to increase its natural gas production. It's not a rich country. It's not Qatar. But even Qatar, because it is pouring billions into the expansion of its LNG production capacity, insists on long-term contracts. That's why it only uh, made a conditional agreement to supply Germany with LNG when and if Germany accepts its terms, and its terms are long-term contracts. Germany doesn't want this because of the energy transition. So Qatar said, well, sorry, go home. And all that Germany managed to do was secure, what was it, 5 or 6 cargoes of LNG from the United Arab Emirates. That's all.
Yeah, yeah,
So, and they have every right to do this. I mean, the US developers of LNG export facilities also rely on long-term contracts to make their investment sensible,
sensible.
economically viable. Yeah, because
Yeah,
these are very expensive projects. They're worth billions of dollars to
yeah.
build. So you need to have long-term guaranteed demand.
Commitment. Yeah, that's right.
Exactly, commitments. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, in the United States, every developer of a new LNG project in the United States, it's incredibly valuable to them to early in the process secure a trading partner who's willing to commit to long-term purchases of the LNG that comes out of their facilities and for export. And so, if a country like Germany is not willing to do long-term agreements, it's going to become increasingly hard for them to rely on liquefied natural gas imports, not just from the United States, but from any of these exporting countries,
Hmm.
because it's an incredibly competitive market. The demand for LNG is skyrocketing every day, and there's going to be more and more, an increasing number of willing long-term partners for these cargoes. And so, Germany's going to have a real change in attitudes about long-term agreements to stay in that market.
Yeah, that's important. Um, well, we have the last point is other source like coal, nuclear, renewables, and the points are: is it enough to follow international energy agency directions to solve? Is this other? Irina, please.
God, no. No, if you follow the IEA for guidance on what to do with your energy mix, well, you end up like Germany and the
Exactly.
UK. I'm
You become a
afraid.
basket case. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and you boost your coal imports and coal consumption because you know renewables don't exactly work the same way that fossil fuels work, which should be clear to everyone. Uh, so yeah, we've seen coal demand rebound very strongly. It actually increased this year because of the European energy crisis. I mean, what more proof do you need that you can just keep on replacing fossil fuels with wind and solar and expect miracles?
Yeah,
Nuclear is gaining traction in the public discourse, if I may call it this way. People are beginning to think about nuclear. I even saw a video of Greta Thunberg saying that nuclear is not a bad idea, which is a kind of a breakthrough, although she hasn't been very active recently, but she was the guiding. I don't know why you're laughing. It's very serious. She was the guiding light of the energy transition. I mean, everybody looked up to Greta. Everybody invited Greta to speak.
yeah,
Now Greta says renewable is not so bad.
yeah. Nuclear is, of course, that's just because somebody stuck a new talking points script in front of her. She's like Joe Biden. She's going to recite,
She's
the
not
script
that
that's
bad.
put in front of her. And I, God bless her. She's a cute child, and I think probably the world's cultish adherence to her pronouncements is one of the major reasons why we're in the situation we're in. Frankly, if you rely on a child to set your energy policy, you get what you deserve. But God bless her anyway. She's just a kid. But yeah, nuclear, coal is as Irina points out, has had a real resurgence in demand, and that's going to continue as this energy transition goes along, and governments in the West continue to try to kill off their oil and gas industries, because the main way to get off of coal is to displace it with natural gas if you want to do it in the near term. In a longer term, the hope is, the narrative is that you can replace it with wind farms, solar arrays, and backup batteries, and all of that technology is being developed. And the problem that Europe is running into more than anyone else right now is that they're destroying their economy, and in the process of destroying the economy, they're destroying their ability to be able to keep passing more and more subsidy measures that are funded by debt, because eventually you're going to run out of the ability to borrow money from other people because people see your economy crashing. And so this is all headed for an enormous catastrophe, frankly, because of this irrational belief that you can just keep printing money forever, and you can't do it. And it's really a recipe for just awful outcomes. And we're going to see some of those outcomes this winter, I'm afraid.
Yeah, perfect. That's it. So the conclusion, let me see if you agree with me. There is no miracle for energy transition. Need,
There
needs
isn't.
planning, truth, need to be true, and time, because
Yeah.
it's nothing in the instant and time.
Yes,
Right.
admitting the truth, the physical truth of the
Yes.
transition and of energy would be a very good start.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much. Have an
Thanks.
excellent week. Was a pleasure.
Thank you.
You
It's
too.
always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure for me too. See you next Monday.
Yeah, and thank you for people that make comments,
Yes,
make fun
thank
of
you
Thanks.
for
us.
the viewers.
It's
Yes,
very interesting for us. Thank
Great
you.
questions.
Yeah. Bye bye.
terrific.
Have a good day. Yeah.
See ya.